everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Meg Alexander, and I am excited, elated, exhilarated, as always, to get to host another Power to Fly virtual chat and learn session. Now, as we get started, I just want to go over some real quick housekeeping items, especially important if maybe you haven't joined us for an event in a while, in which case, welcome back. Or if maybe this is your first Power to Fly event, and if that's the case, hi, welcome. We're so happy to meet you. Now, the biggest thing to know about these events is that they are all about you. They're about our attendees, our community members, and making sure that you get the most out of today's session. So to that end, you are highly encouraged, if you want, to participate in a variety of different ways. You're welcome to turn your cameras on if you would like to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. Truly though, y'all, no need to be Instagram perfect. We do not care if you are coming to us from your living room couch or corner office. We want to meet you where you are. So please understand, there is no pressure to be like, oh yeah, I don't look great, I didn't put on makeup. No, we don't care. Now, just as a real quick caveat, if you have any kind of privacy concerns or anything like that, totally understood. As long as you don't come off mute during today's session, you will not show up on either the live stream or the recording today. Now, if you do still want, if you do still want to participate, but you don't want to do so with your camera, that's completely fine. You can always ask questions, share comments, connect with your fellow attendees in that Zoom group chat. So if you want to, I do want to make sure everybody knows where it is ready to participate. So head over to that group chat. I want to know where everyone is joining us from. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. That's land that belonged to the Fox and Kickapoo tribes in my area. So if you know, obviously, I hope you know where you are, but please let us know where you are. I'm always really eager to see how far our global audience spreads. And if you know whose land you're on, tell us that too. We'd love to hear it. Now, today's session is being recorded, like I mentioned earlier. So if what that means for you is that you don't have to take notes. You get to sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation, and not have to worry if you missed the last reference someone shared or you heard something just so absolutely unbelievable. Now, let's say that that Abby says something today so unbelievable, so like, oh my gosh, how did I not know this before, that you just cannot wait to share it with a friend or coworker or a relative. You have a couple different options. So everybody that registered for today's session is going to get an email from Power to Fly in about, you'll probably get it Monday next week, that will have a link to rewatch this recording when we post it on our website. That'll happen about, like I said, that email will go out next week. If you don't want to wait that long, you want to share this recording or share something that Abby has said with someone else, you don't have to wait that long. You can head over to our YouTube channel. The recordings are posted there within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the live stream. And you can search a whole archive of our past chats and past events on that YouTube channel. I'll be sending links for all of these in the chat thread throughout the upcoming event. So don't worry, I'll send over links. Now, I do recommend that you check it out on the website, mostly because our entire archive, everything from the beginning of the Lunch and Learns through now, everything is stored there, and it's all free and free resources that we want to make sure that you all know about and are able to take advantage of. Now, if you do want to participate, but you don't want to participate publicly, let's say that there's a question you want to ask and you want to be kept anonymous, or your lived experience differs from what we're talking about and you want to say something different, please feel free to share. If you want to do it in the chat, that is fine. But if you want to be kept anonymous, just DM your comment or question to me. I am happy to share it and keep you anonymous. Doesn't matter the reason. And I see we're getting all kinds of people chiming in saying where they're joining from. Chicago, Illinois, Argentina, Memphis, Tennessee, on Chickasaw land. Thank you, Lori. Maha is joining us from Cairo, Egypt. Thank you so much. Jacksonville, Florida, DC, Wisconsin. Loving seeing all the representation here. Thank you all. Now, last but not least, Power to Fly has a mission, right? Our goal, or one of our goals, is to make changes to the workplace, right? We want to see true gender equity. We want to see pay equity. We want to see true belonging, representation, and inclusion in our workspaces. And I think that a lot of you want this too. Now, if these are goals that you have and you also want people to get to that place as fast as possible, we would hope that you want to do that. So if you want to help out, we highly encourage you to take photos or video as you go Share it out to your social networks. Let people know that you are learning and participating with Power to Fly today. We would love to share that. So anything that we can do to get these resources in the hands of as many people as possible is something that we are committed to, because we think that's how we're going to make real change in the workplace. So if you also believe in that mission, like I said, feel free to tag us. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also use our hashtag Power to Fly. We would love to reshare, repost, retweet, whatever y'all want to share out there. All right, so before I introduce you to our speaker, I want to introduce you to Cockroach Labs. Abbey is here on behalf of them today. They are one of Power to Fly's partners, and super excited about this company, y'all. So I'm going to share a link with you in just a little bit here, and it's where you can check out Cockroach Labs page on powertofly.com. Now, this is super important because, maybe you've never heard of Cockroach Labs before. Maybe you haven't heard what they've been up to lately. So definitely check out their page on powertofly.com. From there, you can get information all about Cockroach Labs, their values. You can get information on some of their benefits, the past events that they have partnered on with us, as well as by looking at their open roles to apply. I also recommend you take advantage of the Follow network. If you want more questions about that or have any interest, ask them in the chat, or I'll touch on that a little bit towards the end of today's event. Now, to the main event. So Abbey Russell is joining us today on behalf of Cockroach Labs. Now, Abbey knows how important it is to step out of your comfort zone and be adaptable within your career journey. Now, her career has taken her from MIT's computer science department to software engineering roles to McKinsey's management consulting practice. Abbey is now a senior product manager in charge of data streaming at Cockroach Labs. Her eagerness to learn and hunger for a challenge has armed her with the skills needed to jump into new roles and career paths. Abbey, welcome to the stage today. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Is there anything else that our audience should know about you before we dive into questions?
No, I don't think so, Meg. Thank you for that intro. It was very kind.
I just read what they send me. So this is what happens when we have very impressive people. All right, so let's see here. Last but not least, I do want to highlight, stop share. There we go. So last but not least, I do want to highlight that during today's discussion, as Abbey and I are talking, you all are incredibly welcome and encouraged to participate. You took time out of your day to be here with us live. That is important, and we want to reward you for that. So you have the power to drive the conversation. If you want to dig in deeper on something that we're talking about, let us know. We would love to make sure that you get the information that you came for today. If you submitted a question and we're coming at it from a different angle, if you think there's other details or context we should know, send it in the chat. If you asked a question when you registered and you're not sure if we're going to get to it, send it in the chat. We want to know. All right, so Abbey, to kick us off here, one of the questions that we got asked a lot was the differences between a product manager and a program manager. So can we break down some of that for people that might not have a lot of industry expertise or understanding of the distinctions between them?
Yeah, and I'm going to sidestep the question a bit, because I think there's a theme of I think a lot of the questions around, well, what does a product manager do exactly, and what are the responsibilities, and what is the day-to-day like, where I think ultimately, unfortunately, it's going to very much depend on the company and your role within that company. So, there's so many different overlapping titles: project manager, product manager, program manager, that different companies, it's going to mean something totally different. And the day-to-day in terms of what your responsibilities are and what you own is going to be very, very different. And so what I've generally heard is program manager, does tend to be more on the project manager side, and or you might be kind of managing a project at a higher level where there's a lot of project managers under you, versus product manager tends to focus more on really setting the priorities and thinking more kind of high level strategically on okay, well, why are we doing this? What are we going to do? And then a project manager might be more in charge of executing day to day, just making sure we're on task and on plan. But again, it's going to vary so much. And I think if you're thinking about doing a product management role, I would really kind of think about the kind of things that you really want to do in your everyday job, and then try and find those look and think about less the titles and more just like what those responsibilities are. And so like, for example, I don't do any kind of like design or like Figma stuff in my day-to-day job. But I know for some PMs at some companies that I've worked with when I was, doing like software engineering internships, that's a big part of the job. And like one of the biggest parts of the job. And so ultimately it's going to come down to like the specific role. It's a title that just kind of encompasses so many different things you could be doing.
Yeah, of course. And I think that, it makes sense, right? It makes sense why there's a lot of people asking these questions, because like you said, there's not really industry standard terms for a lot of these things. These titles might mean different things at different orgs, just depending on the way, what their jargon is like. So it makes sense. I would also be completely confused about program versus product, and
and it just makes it really hard, unfortunately, just to even find the right roles. And so if you're trying to do like a LinkedIn search or around to like look for certain roles, you end up having to just parse through a lot of like descriptive text to just kind of figure out, and sometimes they're very nondescript. Ultimately, like I think in the interview process, making sure that you ask you really hammer into like what you're doing day to day is really important. And then, I think there's an argument to be made that like focusing less on the title when you're kind of searching through and more on what is the type of product I want to work on, what is the type of company I want to work for, and like seeking those out first, and then trying to find the open roles, or talking to a recruiter at that company about what kind of role fits the things you want to do and the product you want to work on is maybe the better strategy.
I like that. And I really appreciate you being really transparent about these things, because, some of these questions are stuff we get because it's an enduring kind of pain point for people. And these are not just questions that people ask when they're entering into a field. And it's not just questions people ask when they're trying to, switch careers or pivot. Like, these are things that are not necessarily as clear as they could be for everybody. So it's not just you, y'all. Like, it's okay to be like, I don't even know what job title to look for. That's all right. Okay, so let's talk about the influences and why you decided to pursue a career in product management. What really made you pick it out of all of the myriad options? Like, you were like, no, lion tamer, I want to be a product.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely been a journey to get here. It wasn't something that I had my thoughts on until pretty recently. And so I grew up in Texas. I'm a Texas native, bit of a country girl. I didn't do any sort of like coding or anything growing up. And then I ended up going to the East Coast for school, and then, went to MIT because I was just a huge math and science nerd. And then, when I got there, like CS was the thing everyone wanted to do. And so I kind of tried it out, and I was like, this is awesome. It's super fun. And so then, my journey kind of took me through like, well, I did a lot of software engineering internships from that. I worked at the New York Times on their Android team, worked on their like app, worked on the YouTube's content management team, kind of doing like back end stuff. And I did a lot of like engineering stuff, which it was really fun, but it was something that I didn't think I wanted to do for like the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so I was a bit like lost, because that was kind of where all my skill set was. At that point, I actually wasn't interested in product because the PMs I had worked for, I didn't think had very interesting jobs like on those particular teams, which kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where like what you're actually doing day to day and what your responsibilities are, and how much do you actually own what you're working on, or are you just kind of like, at Google, you're so far down the ladder that you don't have like as much decision making as, power as like I maybe want. So, I kind of wasn't interested in it at that point, but I did go into consulting because it's kind of the like catch-all thing you do when you don't know what you really want to do. And yeah, I learned a lot of interesting things there. I worked across a lot of interesting industries doing like reorgs and digital transformations and marketing and procurement. Stayed for a year, but, wasn't, especially after the pandemic hit and, everything kind of went remote. It wasn't, as interesting to kind of just a job to do when you're not traveling and meeting new people, which is like a really, really fun piece of it. And so then I kind of was like looking for what to do. And, I thought about a few things. I thought about first, like one of my aspirations was to maybe like start a company one day. And so I wanted to do something that like would help with that. I also just love the one of the things I realized, like, because I'm taking a step back in consulting where I was working on a bunch of random things like procurement and reorgs. I really love technology and working on technology. And so I really missed that. And then in consulting also, I didn't like being so far removed from the impacts. Like I wanted to be a part of building something on the front lines that was then, impacting the business versus like sitting 10 steps behind in a PowerPoint presentation or like a spreadsheet, like thinking about maybe some of the like strategic goals for the company, but never actually getting to go see those things through, or like getting to work on them, just kind of working very, very behind the scenes and not following things through to the end. I didn't like that. I wanted to be a part of like building stuff that was exciting. That's what I really loved when I was, working on the New York Times Android app, for example. And so, one thing I thought about was VC, but it didn't have that piece. It was, you're also so far removed. And so I just ended up talking to a lot of people, reaching out to a lot of people on LinkedIn who, had maybe similar backgrounds to me, and just, had like 100 phone calls maybe over the course of a couple months of, friends I knew, friends of friends, like LinkedIn, people that I hadn't met before, just talking through like their career journeys. And, that's kind of what convinced me to end up going into product management, is that I talked to a lot of people that had those similar drives as I did and similar interests, and had found really good like slots at products, in product roles. And so that's kind of what kind of got me into it. And then I was, after that, it was, okay, well, what kind of product role do I want? What kind of company do I want to work for? And I really wanted to work somewhere that was, wasn't a really early stage startup, but was like still pre-IPO, because I wanted the mix of like somewhere that had a little bit of structure and had some, really world-class PMs I could learn from, but also somewhere that was like growing a lot and had a lot of opportunity to take a lot of ownership. And so, also just wanted to work somewhere where I really believed in like the technology, and that it could be really, really successful. And I kind of found, all those things and more in like Cockroach, which has been a great place to work and to start a product career in.
Excellent. Now, okay, we do have a question that kind of builds off this. Jim had asked in the chat thread, as a product manager, you set priorities for what gets done and what doesn't. So you're often in the middle of conflicting goals. How do you handle that? And what kind of temperament do you need in order to do that well? I love this question, right? Because there's a bunch of different ways to answer. From your perspective, how would you answer this? What do you think is necessary or helpful to hold that position?
Yeah, and yeah, Jim knows as well, because he's also works at Cockroach with me, and there's a lot of these things going on. Yeah, I would say yeah, you're definitely always in the middle of kind of conflicting goals, and a lot of times, even I think for the to the temperament question, you've got to kind of be a bit of a bit of a rock. Like you have to kind of be able to stay calm. And I've definitely had people get very angry at me about things that maybe weren't my fault, or like happened way before I got here. But like at the end of the day, you have to be able to take like ownership of things, even if it wasn't your fault, or you weren't in part of the decision making, because you don't own like that. I would say like the attitude to have is like, you don't own the like action. It's not a checklist job where you need to check off, oh, I did this thing, I did this thing, I did this thing, I did my job right. It's like you're ultimately responsible for the outcome, like the customer outcome, like the business outcome. And so if you don't get there, like that's on you, even if you did everything right. And so you kind of have to like be able to take ownership and be okay with that, and be okay with maybe not having a deterministic outcome to your actions. And be able to like take that and I think ultimately when you're dealing with like a lot of stakeholders that maybe want different things, being able to take like ownership is it becomes really important. And so yeah, but it's definitely not for. It's definitely a place where you kind of have to like find your center and not get very like emotional or upset about things, because ultimately the things that you're maybe not falling short on matter to people, matter to the customers, matter to the salespeople, matter to whoever. And so like trying to, if you can, find a way to like fulfill their goals and needs is important.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And y'all, if you feel otherwise, or if you have, have heard of other such skills or have another idea of successful product management that you've seen, please feel free, let us know in the chat box and keep those questions coming out. This is really, really great. Maha actually also has another question, and apologies y'all if I'm mispronouncing your names. So please tell me, I'm happy to correct myself. Maha says, whenever I Google PM, the Venn diagram with 3 intersecting circles appears: tech, business, and UX. Can you elaborate more from your point of view? So I like this question because it kind of shows where the intersection of various industries would be. Do you see, do you see product management existing outside of tech and UX? Like if people don't want to necessarily go into a tech industry,
Mm-hmm.
do you see this existing in other fields?
Yeah, there's definitely like someone in every field anywhere. Every company is either selling like a service or a product, and anyone that's selling a product, you have someone that has some ownership and is thinking about like, all right, what are the goals for this product? And then given that, how are we going to design the product? How are we going to launch it? How are we going to, make this product successful? And so again, back to the like, what the title of the role is, there's a ton of different titles that could like fit in to what like a product manager could do. And then the other thing I would say is that like today, almost every company is a technology company in some way. Especially if we're thinking about like software, every company is at least, probably building their own software internally. And so no matter what industry you would want to work in, there's definitely like, if you want to work in the intersection of that industry and software, you definitely can as well. Which is one of the things I really liked about when I first decided to like pursue CS as like a major and things like that. I think for your question, Maha, about just the intersection, the tech, business, and UX, like when I would replace UX with just more like customer empathy. So it's what are the goals of the customer? What are the goals of the business? And what are maybe the like limitations or possibilities of the technology? That's kind of where you have to intersect. And I would say like the kind of job of a product manager is to take the goals of the business and the customer goals, and then translate that into some actions you can take on the technology side to go fulfill those.
Yeah. I've heard the ringmaster analogy a lot of times as well, where it's like, you're not necessarily, you're in control and you're trying to manage all of these moving pieces, and they have, separate and conflicting agendas or goals or whatever. But I think that very much helps to kind of ground in reality, like the skills that you would need to do this, and also like the forces at play, right? You said that being able to kind of take charge and take ownership is super helpful for a project manager, and it makes a ton of sense. You're the one that's trying to keep everybody going towards that long range goal.
Yeah, definitely. Just repeating the goal and knowing what it is and getting everyone on board is definitely like an important thing to do.
Yeah. We did get an anonymous question here. This person says, I know that a lot of certifications are somewhat starchy, like they're good to have, but plenty of talented people are without them. Are there any PMP specializations or other certifications geared toward product specifically? Have you seen anything like this?
Yeah, I haven't done any certifications, I would say, and I haven't seen any. And I'll caveat this by saying, like, I definitely am not the end all be all of knowing this. So this is just in my personal experience, I haven't seen any certifications that are particularly looked at in a general sense, or anyone I know that has gotten a product job that I know of hasn't done any, like, tried to do any specific certifications. I mean, definitely like your background matters in terms of having transferable skills and maybe having a degree that can point towards some competency and technical skills. What I would say, like, that is probably helpful is it's more product specific. So there's a thing called like product manager fit. So how much of you, maybe you have all of the general PM skills, but each product role, depending on what you own, you're going to have a certain level of fit in terms of like, okay, are you a user of the product? Do you have some like understanding of the customer empathy, or are you totally new to the area, or do you bring some specific perspective or have some specific skill set that helps for that particular product? And that's going to vary so much depending on the product. But that's also, I think, if you're trying to transfer in a way that you can really, and get your first PM role, a way that you can really stand out is to have some deep knowledge, some very specific, unique knowledge that is helpful for that specific product. And so, that is where maybe like certificates can come into play. So like, let's say you want to go work at Amazon as a product manager on AWS, and you go get certified with AWS's like be a certified. I know AWS has like a ton of certifications to be like an operator or to like certify that you like really understand AWS systems and you've worked with them. And so that might be something for them that they would look at and say, wow, okay, like you use all these products so extensively, you have such a knowledge of like our educational materials, you have like, even if you haven't done the product role before, you do have like some specific value to bring to AWS. So that could be an area.
Like that. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about some of the different types of product areas you can find within the industry. If you are trying to figure out what your niche might be, do you have any tips for people who are trying to figure that out?
Yeah. So I think, and I can talk to like a product like Cockroach, which is like a data platform, has a managed service component. There's certainly like a lot of areas that are going to be very similar across companies. So for example, like for a data platform product, you need someone that's thinking about integrations. That's kind of what I do. And to, there's some other people that do that as well. You need to think about observability. You need to think about growth. You need to think about security. And then there's going to be separate things that are going to be more specific to the product. So we have like a lot of product managers that work on like SQL or like KV and storage, like the storage layers of the database, because those are like very important for Cockroach. Whereas like a different data platforms company might not have as much focus on those things. And so for those things that like are transferable, I would say like, well, one, it's always fun to work on the core of a product and what makes it unique. But for the things that are more transferable, like growth is one area that's really interesting, that you're going to do a lot more data analysis and do things like try and optimize user flows and think about like signups and conversions, which I don't work on growth. So I don't do much of that. I do less data analysis, and I don't think at all about like signups and conversions really. And so that's actually one, even outside of data platforms. I think a lot of like companies that are in the growth phase are going to maybe have a growth PM. But then you might be doing a lot less of the like day-to-day like product, other things you might consider product management or project management, because you're doing more stuff in the UI and thinking about you're thinking more about like marketing and marketing funnels versus like if you're working on the KV and storage layer, you'd be thinking a lot more on the technical side. So if you're interested in technical problems, you would want to do something more like that. And then another angle I would think about is like how transferable is this maybe to another company or industry. So like security, for example, that's hugely transferable, I would say, between different like roles and companies, and is a lot more like cross-cutting as well. And so if you're like a security PM, the same kind of problems you run into at Cockroach TV, you're going to run into at Datadog and at AWS and like across a lot of different products. So that's like the like information that you kind of gather is going to be very useful for a lot of different roles. And then also you get to work. That's a cross-cutting role where you'll get to work versus growth. You'll kind of be a little bit siloed out. For security, you're going to work across like every feature and every piece of the product. And so you get to like work across a lot of different areas with a lot more people. And so, yeah, in terms of identifying your niche, again, I would just think about what the day-to-day work is like. So like, do you like doing data analysis? Do you like talking to people? Do you like do you like having your day be a little bit different every time? And so the different, or do you like to get really, really deep in an area and be like a really like deep subject matter expert? Like those are the kind of things you might want to be thinking about.
Okay. All right, cool. Okay. Now, before we leave the topic entirely, a lot of people had questions regarding transferable skills, the soft skills that are absolutely, you know, beyond helpful. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but let's dive in. Is there anything else to add to that list of, you know, skills that you might not see as transferable but are, and then we can talk about some, you know, some other skills that you might need to develop.
Yeah, I think definitely like there, yeah, I don't know if I have too much of a unique perspective on these things, but like, you know, I think you would guess a lot of them, like technical know-how is very useful. But more than anything, and more than knowledge about the technical side, it's more about being able to translate. Like you're a translator for the user problem. You're a translator for like, you know, the technical. You need to be able to translate what your engineering team is telling you, maybe especially if you're working on a more technical product, into something that is consumable, you know, maybe in a blog format, like a, you know, marketing material. You need to be able to translate all of these different pieces, marketing and the, you know, customer, it all into like between each other. And so you kind of have to be able to take in information and decide, oh, who's my audience going to be, and how do I position this right for them? And so that's definitely it's a bit different of a skill set than just being like technical. It's about like
it's communication.
It's a communication skill set. And I end up like having to. It'll also depend on what PM role you're in, but as like my job, I've like written blog posts and I've got given like a talk that's on like YouTube, and as well as actually just doing meetings with people, presentations and things like that. And so that being able to, you know, presence and communication skills in general, like are always going to be helpful.
No, of course. And I think, you know, you made a really good point there when you're talking about being able to translate for other people. You know, it's not like you all aren't speaking English. It's like there's just different dialects within. And so you're right, like being able to translate or to understand what the answer that person is looking for and what their concerns might be, in contrast to what, you know, somebody from a completely different team is, you know, trying to work with. Like, I think it's a really undervalued skill, and it touches so many jobs, y'all. Like I sit through a bunch of these, and I'm telling you, communication is like one of the number one things that we talk about because of, you know, that like language barrier sort of thing.
Yeah, I love the way you put it, the dialects. I think that's exactly right.
I stole that from someone else, so I have no idea who, but I definitely stole that elsewhere. Okay, let's talk about soft skills, blah, blah, blah. Oh, we did get another question in. This person wanted to know, this person says, I don't have PM experience. Are mapping and ordering tasks, like you talked about earlier, a standard process? I want to understand how those work before interviewing.
Yeah, I would say definitely if you're doing an interview for a PM role, there's like a lot of standard questions that get asked. And one of them is always, or, you know, it's always a part of it is always going to revolve around, well, how would you prioritize this different like list of competing priorities? And so the big thing in terms of interviewing is to have like a framework for how you're going to be thinking about those, and then, you know, put that in the context of like, what is the overall company goal, or what is our business goal? And so, yeah, I think for interviewing, there's a lot of, you can look this up. There's a lot of like resources around, like if you do cracking the PM interview, they kind of have a lot of like pre-built frameworks. I think when you actually become a PM, it gets a bit messier, and things shift. Priorities are always shifting, and things come up, and so you do definitely need to be structured in your thinking and communication. And it's an area that I always need to get better in. But you do the same thing, but it's less like structured and nice, like an interview would be.
Okay. All right. Excellent. All right, so we've got about 30 minutes left in today's session. If you have questions, please keep sending them in. I'm recording all of them that are asked, so hopefully we'll be able to get to as many as possible today. Let's see. I want to come back to the interview idea, but we'll save that for a little bit later. Okay, this person says, I've been a PM for about 8 years. I have my PMP and ACP certificates. My industry experience is in chemistry. Then I moved to manufacturing, industrial, animation, and app builds. How could I leverage this experience to get jobs that stress that they want coding skills or many years of IT direct experience? So this person says, I know I'll be successful. I just need someone to believe in me and see my skills as transferable. Have you seen people make this, kind of not make the argument, I should say, but like structure how they're presenting themselves so it's more clear?
Yeah, and I would say for the definitely putting all the work you've done in the context of what is important for a PM is really important. Like just even in general, if you're trying to break into PM, like putting all your resume items in terms of like your impact is like one way to kind of translate what you've done into how it could be used, like into the way that speaks to what if they're looking for for a PM. I think specifically to this question, which is more about how can you show that you have the technical chops to maybe work on a technical product, even though you clearly have the like PM know-how. I've definitely seen people that don't have a CS background or a very technical background move into being a PM for a very technical product, even at like Cockroach. I know like several people that have made that transition. And I think the thing is, I mean, like definitely the more you can just be competent in your communication when you're interviewing and just put everything, if that's what you want to get across in the interview, making sure that you bring up those little like nuggets of information that show like your technical chops is important. But also just stressing you clearly have, you might be going against, like, they might be considering someone that has all technical knowledge, but no PM knowledge. And so stressing like your unique, how your unique PM knowledge has, gives you a certain impact and gives you a certain perspective that's different. And that is actually going to be useful is the ultimate thing. I think ultimately, like, my biggest interview kind of tip is to, like, the meta conversation that's going on is not the meta conversation that's going on between you and your interviewer isn't, oh, can they competently answer this question? It's, oh, are they going to be impactful in this role? Can they like fulfill this role, right? And so, I always tell people that are interviewing, okay, go find out like what are the business goals of this company. And then even if you're talking about something totally, like you're talking about your favorite product, bring it back, tie it back to like that meta conversation, tie it back to, okay, well, this is my favorite product because XYZ reason. And actually it's really like, if you think about the way where your company is right now, X, Y, and Z actually really are important. That what they did here could be done with you guys and could lead to this business impact, which I know you guys are trying to grow, or you're trying to improve your gross margins or open up this new market, like those kinds of things. Like being able to show that you're thinking about that at a high level is the biggest thing, I think, for showing that you have like that confidence.
Yeah, of course. Now I know this person was, or actually several people are also interested in how you can display this before you get to the interview. Because at a glance, you might not look like exactly what the HR or the recruiter is looking for. So one of the things that I hear a whole lot, like a lot, is that I don't know, I was never taught this in school, probably a lot of other people weren't. Basically, what you're trying to do is create a very, very, very obvious breadcrumb trail for the recruiter. So
yeah,
you
definitely
need to grab them. It needs to be unavoidably clear what you can do. Have you seen any formatting for resumes that changes this at all? Like, I've seen a couple things that people are recommending when it comes to trying to flex transferable skills in a resume. But what have you seen anything that seems more effective to help somebody get to that interview phase where they might be hitting a wall because of the transition?
Yeah, I would definitely say the biggest thing I have a tip around is like translating everything in your resume from, oh, I did this and this and this, or I have this and this skill, to this is the impact that I made, is huge, because it shows like that even if you're the thing you were doing is something completely different, showing that you one know what the actual like goal of the thing you were doing it was, and you had an impact, and that impact is like measurable and tangible, is the kind of things that like PM, they're looking for someone that's going into a PM role. The other thing I would say in terms of maybe not a resume thing, but a tip that is, I haven't heard anyone give that, but I think is really useful, is to get on, if you have a specific, like I mentioned the product manager fit, if you have specific like things companies you want to work for, products you want to work on, get in the pipeline before there's even a job there, is my tip, because a lot of like the way a lot of tech companies especially work, especially like smaller ones, is they might have an internal pipeline that they pull through for the job before ever posting it online in a public place.
Yeah.
Like a lot of jobs get filled that way. And so, because it's, it makes sense from a company's perspective to, if they already have a lot of like qualified candidates that they know about
and have already been onboarded, already know the company culture. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, definitely if you're already an employee, definitely even more so, but even just like people that they know of that have applied to, they have interviewed for past jobs and maybe weren't quite a fit, or have reached out. There's Cockroach does something, I think a lot of companies do this, where we have a general application where you can apply even if there's not a role that fits you, and say, hey, I'm interested, here's my resume, here's stuff about me, and then you're just already on the recruiters list for the next role that opens that maybe fits you. And so I would go through as an exercise, even 6 months before you're looking to actually make a switch, and go through and say, what is the company I want to work for? What is the product I want to work for? Go reach out to those recruiters, or if they have like a general application like we do at Cockroach, and just go get on their radar and say, hey, I know you're not hiring right now, but I want you to keep me in mind. Here's, the kind of thing I want to work on and why I'd be great at it. And then it makes so much sense for them to just like look at you first, because you're already in their mind. They're in their job is to like get a qualified candidate, in the pipeline as quickly as possible, with a job as quickly as possible. I mean, this advice may be a bit different for a giant company that has more of a standard has maybe an APM program or something that's more standard, and they take a lot of people at once. But for a lot of companies, especially smaller companies like Cockroach, which I think are the better places to work anyway, they have a specific role that they need filled right now. Mm-hmm. And so you can get on that recruiter's radar early, and that's actually how I got my Cockroach role. Is like I had talked to a recruiter about a different role before that I wasn't a good fit for, and then they reached out to me months later and were like, oh, hey, we're actually opening up this role that is more for like a new PM. Are you interested in it? And I was like, yes. And they never posted that role online, so no one else, if I hadn't already talked to the recruiter, I would never even been considered. I wouldn't have even known about the role. And so that's my biggest like secret tip in order to like
that's a good one. I like this. Yeah. I think that's an excellent tip there. And just to reiterate for y'all, if you want an easy way to get in the pipelines of these employers or these recruiters beforehand, the follow network that I mentioned on Power to Fly is a huge, like one click and you're done. At the top of every company page on powertofly.com, top right-hand corner, you'll see a big pink button. It's going to say follow. Clicking that puts you on the follow network for that company. Now, it does a lot of really great things for you, but the biggest thing that you're going to see is it works like having a friend at that company already. So it lets, clicking it lets the HR team know that you are interested in working with that company even before you fill out an application. So you are on radar and on a list already. It's also a really, really great option. Like she said, if you don't see anything posted right now that suits you, but it's also amazing if you are thinking maybe about, activating a job search. It's a really great way to have a short list of companies for you to come back and say like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed listening to Abby from Cockroach Talk, I found a lot about the company culture would be really cool. So it's a good way to get yourself a short list in the most passive way possible. Like, let us do the extra work for y'all. Seriously, like our tech team comes up with these features, use them to your benefit. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about before we go on to our next question. If you have, Kara wants to know about the feature. It's called the Follow Network. It's going to be a big pink button. It says follow. It'll be at the top right-hand corner of every page on powertofly.com. If you're not seeing it, it's probably because you're not logged in. So you got to log in to join the Follow Network because it needs to know who you are. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other ways people can prepare for a PM interview. When it comes to how that interview process differs from other jobs, what should people know?
Yeah, and so I'll just give a high level of the stuff that, I won't go too deep into because it's repeated a lot of areas across the internet. And like I mentioned, like cracking the PM interview, there's a ton of resources for like the basics of like a PM interview. But the few basic kind of types of PM interviews would be like the favorite product, doing like a prioritization and going through frameworks, or them asking you kind of generally like, how would you improve this product or launch this new product? And my just biggest tip for interviewing is to practice just like a lot. Like that's what I've done for every job that I've gotten, and every job that I haven't gotten is because I didn't practice enough. And so I just, especially for this type of interview where it's less about like technical skills, it's more about, can you communicate well in the moment? I think that's huge. And so I always, the morning of whenever I do an interview, the morning, I always have a friend call me and do a practice interview like right before I'm supposed to do an interview, and I always find it like warms me up. But yeah, so I would go look at resources for all those things. But I would say my tips for like really standing out would be, like I said earlier, understanding that meta conversation that you're having with the interviewer. And so, like again, what is your favorite product question, which is a classic you're always going to get. I wouldn't think about it as just like, oh, this is a cool product. This is a product that is a really good product or is interesting. The point is, again, the point you're trying to get across is I can provide value to you, to this business. And so pick a product that has, is maybe something they've never heard of and has a lot of transferability into the company that you're trying to talk about. So like, this product is, this is the strategy that they use to be successful. And that's a strategy that like this company should like employ as well because, XYZ reason. And so, yeah, I would just always be thinking about, for all of these questions, for all of the interviews that you do, like, what is the thing that they're trying to determine about me? And how can I make it really, really easy for them by just very like clearly communicating and outlining the things that showcase like my talent. And then the biggest thing there is always like really understand the product that you're applying for, the company you're applying for, where they are as a business, where they're going, and stuff will just come to you from that.
Excellent, loving this. Jim is actually asking in here, when you're practicing, do you practice like behavioral questions, or when you're practicing answering questions, what types, I should say, are you thinking of?
Yeah. So I would say there's usually like the behavioral part that you might have with like a recruiter. Yeah, you should definitely practice all that stuff. I think that's the area that maybe people don't really pay enough attention to, because they're like, oh yeah, I'm just talking about myself and like my journey, and I don't need to think about that because it's not a question. It's not like a interview question. It's just myself. I always find, maybe I'm just not naturally very articulate, but I always find that I need to like have thought through what I'm going to say and why I'm saying a certain thing, and what is the thing I want my interviewer to know about me, and how am I gonna bring up certain stories or aspects of my background that showcase that. But for the most part, for like a PM interview, yeah, they're the kind of the ones I mentioned before. Yeah, the favorite product one is always going to come up, and then the kind of follow-up questions are always going to be, they're always kind of the same. It's like, okay, well, you're a product manager at Facebook and you're in charge of launching their groups feature. How are you going to go about that? Okay, well, how are you going to measure success? Okay, well, let's say you launch and you're not doing well. How do you determine quickly what to do next and things like that? There's a lot of resources online that will kind of explain to you or just give you a bunch of examples of all these questions that you can just practice with like a friend or find someone. I always find that like when I was interviewing for PM jobs, I found there was an online community. I forget what it's called, but there's a few different online communities of people that are all practicing for interviews. And I just found some people that were also trying to break into PM, and I would just on the weekend just have practice interviews with them and interview them, and then they would interview me, and we kind of went back and forth. I just did that for like the month before I started interviewing for PM jobs, and then I was pretty good at that point. But that all of that stuff that I mentioned will kind of get you to the point of competency. What I talked about in terms of like making you really, really good and stand out, it's all about like that meta conversation and how can you showcase that you are thinking about not just the day-to-day and answering the question, you're thinking about, oh, how can I go provide value for the business?
Excellent. Okay. I'm loving all of these tips. Thank you. And I hope that y'all are also enjoying what we're talking about here. If you've got questions, please feel free to keep sending them in. We've got about 5 more minutes of question time. Okay. Kapaga had written in the chat asking what skills would employers be looking for in 2023? So let's talk about some of the stuff that you're seeing become more sought after, or what's the newest thing that people want. If people are trying to get ahead of the curve, what are some of the skills that might really suit them and might help them get jobs going forward?
Yeah, I think it's always any new industry that's like hot and new is always going to be like a great place to join up at the beginning, because you're going to be able to, no one has 10 years of experience in that industry. So you're going to be able to like more, quickly show that like you're going to be able to just compete in terms of like having the right background. So like right now, I mean, the big one is like AI. And I think if you can go show that like there's a ton of companies that are like looking to hire in that space, and a ton of companies getting funded. And if you can go show that you have like a good enough knowledge, like maybe you can go do some like Kaggle competitions or like build a few projects that you can showcase that show that you have the like technical understanding, or maybe even go write some blog posts on like a new AI model, Stable Diffusion, whatever. If you can go do those little things that other people haven't done and other people don't have experience in that industry, that can be enough in those kinds of new nascent industries to really showcase that like you have a set of knowledge that like other people don't. And people, since it's growing so quickly, there's a lot of opportunities that people are hiring in. And so I always love to, I think those kind of industries. It was like crypto a year ago, but I don't think that there's too many opportunities there right now. And also I think AI is the biggest one. It's a little bit of a harder time, unfortunately, just because of a lot of tech companies their stock has been getting killed, so they're more kind of like layoffs and stuff, unfortunately. But that'll turn around and there'll be a new hot thing soon. So it's always cyclical.
Yeah. All right. We've got people asking in the chat if anybody has any information on like interview groups or where to find them. One thing I will tell you is Powerfly used to host a lot more of these, and we didn't get a ton of joiners, but I think it's because we were going too general. So if this is something y'all are interested in and you would want to go to like an interview, what am I trying to go, like training or round robin kind of thing, give me a +1 in the chat. Throw me a +1 in there, and I'll see if we can get something like this on the books for y'all. Because if there's interest, we want to provide these things for you. All right, I'm also sharing a little bit more information in the chat, some stuff that I had pulled from previous resume chats that I've sat on. So hopefully that might be helpful for y'all if you want. Let's see. Okay, last quick question. Can being a PM be a completely remote job, or should people expect that they need to be on site? Obviously, it's going to differ from job to job, but what is your experience then?
Yeah, it's going to differ. I've been mostly remote because I joined during the pandemic, and like my manager lives in Park City, Utah. And so he's, he's completely remote. I right now, I'm usually based in New York, but right now I'm nomading around for like 6 months. And it's, totally fine because, Cockroach has like a distributed culture. So um, I work with people over the world. And so because of that, it's not really needed for me to be in the office, although I do like going into the office. And so, yeah, you can totally have a totally distributed job. It just depends on the company. And I've been pretty successful with being distributed.
Okay, cool. My last question for you. What is one piece of advice that you want to share with people who are looking to pivot into project management or product management? If they leave today and they only remember one thing, what should it be?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is to find the right like product management fit for you is probably just the biggest advice, because all these other things are going to be so much easier for you, and it's going to be so much easier to like showcase your value and to when you're interviewing, you know say you have a unique perspective and tell the interviewer that unique perspective on their business. And if you just have really good fit with that particular product. And so that's, I think if you can really do that and figure that out and what's the best place for you, everything else is going to be like so much easier.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's go back to our slides here. We've got about 4 minutes left in today's session. I know it always goes really, really quickly, but I just wanted to make sure that we took a little bit of time here to touch back on Cockroach Labs. So we had asked you some questions. What y'all are seeing on the screen here are some of the questions that we had asked of Abby before today's session. So the one that I want to dive in on first here is, what are your top tips for someone who's interviewing? So I know we've hit this kind of hard, and a lot of the questions have been around it. When you're talking about getting in as many practice reps, something that occurred to me, do you ever like record yourself and then watch back, or do you tend to do it like mirror with a person live as opposed to doing that on your own?
Oh yeah, definitely. I have definitely done the record back, which is really useful just to hear how many times you're maybe like stumbling or saying things that aren't quite articulate. One thing when I was doing, I don't know if this exists for product management, but when I was doing consulting interviews, they are very similar to product management interviews. They're like case interview style. I forget his name, but there was I had a bunch of recordings, like MP3 recordings of someone interviewing someone, and then he would like stop the recording. He would stop it and voice over and say, "Oh, here's what this candidate did well. Here's what the candidate did wrong." And I found that really helpful just when I was first getting into case interview style interviews, because I had only done technical interviews before. Just hearing, someone who was an expert at it point out the good and bad things they did. So maybe maybe YouTube is a good place to find like example product management interviews where you can pause it, give your answer, and then unpause it, see what the candidate said, and then maybe see what like they did well and not. Or also another tip would be to just find someone that's done a lot of product management interviews and can tell you, because no matter like practicing with someone that equally doesn't know how to do a good interview, it's helpful in some respects, but not as helpful as like someone that really knows what they're saying. So
yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And honestly, I, as somebody who's on camera a lot and has to watch themselves back, there are so many things that I do that I had no idea until I like had to watch myself like talking to someone or, hosting one of these. Like, I play with my hair constantly. Did I know I did that? No. Like that. And it seems kind of small and stupid, but especially if you are nervous going into an interview, that can be a really easy way to be like, okay, at least I know like that I'm coming across like I want to come across. So definitely helpful. And don't try not to be too mean to yourself, because it is really easy, at least for me, when listening back to some of the answers you give. You start to feel like the Miss America contestant, right? With the like and the such as, and it feels like you're not talking in complete sentences. It's okay, y'all. It's fine. Just focus mostly on like, do you struggle for what you're trying to say? And are you fidgeting the entire time and looking like you don't want to be there?
Yeah, and the thing to know is just anytime you've ever seen anyone do an interview on a podcast or do a presentation, a YouTube video, TED Talk, whatever, their first version was really, really bad. And they did
Oh
a lot of
yeah.
practice and a lot of iteration. And I found that to be true about everything in life. It's like, it's okay. The first version is always bad for everyone. It's just, can you then iterate on and practice enough to get to a good point?
Yeah, yeah, of course. You want it to be a little bit more second nature and muscle memory as opposed to trying to scramble to know what you wanted to say or how you want to say it. All
Yeah.
right, y'all. That is going to bring us to a close today. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Abbey. It has been wonderful to get to know you and learn from you for the last hour. Really, really appreciative of you sharing your time and your experience with us. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks all of you guys for attending. It's fun.
Yeah. Huge thank you to our attendees as well, especially all our YouTube viewers. Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here. I hope that you all give yourselves a pat on the back. It is not easy in this day and age to take an hour for yourself and do something good for yourself and your career. So, congratulations to all of you for doing that for yourselves today. I hope that we will see you back here on another Power to Fly event soon. And I hope that y'all have a safe, happy, healthy rest of your week and weekend. That's going to be it for us.